This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. We are waiting for Harriet Suchet to join us today, so for now I'm going to go ahead and get started on the continuing information, and we're going to go ahead and flip on over to the presentation at this point. And we'd left off talking about Jack actively having attempted to hurt, injure, maim, who knows what it was in his mind at the time, throwing hot water on people, coming in with a gun. Needless to say, he had been arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, and we noticed that he had bonded out underneath the last name Torrance with an O instead of Terrence with an A. As we continue through the presentation, we start to see that it did actually revert to his real name, at least to the degree that he was given counsel for representation in this criminal act, and he had a piece of paper in his belongings that indicated notice of responsibility for payment of appointed counsel and right to hearing. So that was an interesting thing I hadn't seen before, because I automatically assumed if they gave you representation or you're entitled to representation, that was not something that you necessarily paid for, but it appears as though back in 1983 that was something that was happening. So on September 1st of 1983, Jack was ordered to appear before the court, and he is provided counsel at that time. During this, he purportedly received 60 days and 3 years probation, but based on the paperwork and activities that I have, it appears that it was more like 30 days and 1 year probation. And we're going to continue on through that information that tells us about that. So right after, obviously, this arrest and being given counsel and appearing in court, we see that Jack is quickly attempting to sell guns. I did attempt to locate this John K. Flannery, who actually purchased a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson, model number 154. Has a serial number on it. I'm not sure exactly how I could track something like that without having access to law enforcement, but I did want to reach out to this John Flannery. I did locate him in the Rio Linda area, which was consistent with the paperwork and Jack's paperwork, which we're going to be talking about. But I wasn't able to actually make contact with anybody. I was hoping maybe I could get a hold of a child or somebody who had inherited this gun after the fact. Let's see, Mr. Flannery picked up his .30-30. So there's actually two guns that are being listed here, the .38 caliber and then the .30-30. Let's see here. So on September 9th, Jack is selling the .38 caliber to John Flannery of 420 Lilac Lane, Rio Linda, California. I did have a phone number of 916-991-2408, but all of that led me kind of to a dead end. It does mean that he has taken some time to clear up his affairs, as I had indicated, because he clearly is not in jail attempting to sell guns, though I hear these days just about everything is possible. I have recently been talking to somebody who was released from prison for trafficking, and I found it quite comical that he had indicated that they could still get drugs inside of the prison. And this is something you hear about, you don't really know about. It's nothing you can put your thumb on. But we continued the conversation because he had indicated that he had quit doing the drugs and, of course, had straightened up, but that it was still very real to be able to obtain those in prison. And one of the statements that he had made was that what would normally have costed him $20 on the street costs $400 in prison. And I was about floored. Hi, good morning, Nolan.
Or
Welcome to the show.
yeah, a couple quick points. If he got 30 days, it would have been county jail. It would not have been prison. And then,
No. We're no,
or,
no. We're not. I'm on prison with someone else.
someone else. Okay. But
Yeah.
also on the prior slide, if he got court-appointed counsel, either a public defender or a panel attorney, that he would have had to qualify for that, which means he had to tell the court that he didn't have any money, which is odd.
Oh,
Yeah, so he's holding out to the public or to the court anyway that he's semi-indigent at that point.
right. Well, and that would make me then question whether or not he had actively gone to work for Hewlett Packard at this point as well. Then, right? I mean,
Right.
if
Well,
he's
I thought he was with Hewlett Packard in Roseville. Yeah.
it says 1983, but we don't have a specific date or time for that. So it's kind of just thrown in here, maybe not even chronologically ordered. I just know that in 1983, at some point, he had attained that job with Hewlett Packard. So basically, in order to get this type of help, you're saying that he is partially indigent.
Yes. Or he's asserting that to the court, whether it's true or not. But he's
Right.
not hiring a private lawyer.
No, he's not. And that kind of goes along with what we know about Jack not really having jobs for most of his life. And we see him selling a bunch of things. So I don't know if he's selling them to quickly off them or if he is selling them to make ends meet for this particular act.
I think one of his gripes in some of the communications he sent out over the years is that he doesn't feel like he's been adequately compensated for the stuff he's done.
Yes, that is something that Harriet had literally throughout the Zodiac period and sometime after the Zodiac had stated that the ciphering of the messages had come out to is that he was not getting paid and that he was upset that he was in fact doing his job. Well, that makes a little more sense out of that then. So definitely we're still looking for possibly him not actively going to work for Hewlett Packard until after this point to begin with. So aside from that, like I said, I had assumed that there was a possibility that he had not gone straight away to jail to do his time, that the courts had allowed him some time to handle his affairs. And we see this particular sale of guns that's occurring on September 8th of 1983, which is merely 8 days after his court appearance that we saw there, where he was granted an attorney. And that would lead me to believe that's why this paperwork leads me to believe that he didn't go in and actually serve that time immediately. Now, if somebody's given something like 60 days, don't they get good time or good behavior time
Right.
or something like that?
Generally, they do half of it, so that would explain the 30 days.
And that's about the time that I think that I can pinpoint or nail down that he was actively in jail, because I see so much other activity that's occurring that I'm not sure if he could handle that in court, like selling gun or in jail, like selling guns. How are you selling guns if you're in jail?
Yeah, and it obviously wasn't a felony. It had to be a misdemeanor if he
What's
still had
that?
the guns. Because once you have a felony, you got to give up your guns.
I think it did say that they had, let me go back, that they had reduced it to a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
So Jack is released on bond for assault and battery with a deadly weapon in North Highlands, said to be given 30 days, but knowing the system, got away with good behavior. Yeah. I do think that it was reduced to a misdemeanor, and we talked about that, I think, or at least I feel like we did last week.
Yeah.
And how somebody has an assault with a deadly weapon that gets reduced to a misdemeanor. I mean, you're
That's
a
a
danger.
serious crime. It's crazy.
That's a very serious crime. I don't understand the system sometimes. I'm going to go back to those pictures that we just flashed across. They're pretty graphic, but I was waiting for Harriet to join us. She's supposed to be coming in at some point in the early part of the show. So yes, I wanted to research so what I was talking about when you came in with prison was an individual that I have talked to that had indicated that they had recently been released from prison for trafficking, drug trafficking. And of course, my inquiring mind wants to know, can you still get drugs in jail?
Yeah, definitely.
Evidently it's a thing, but the price was astronomical. So he said what you could get on the street for $20 would cost you 400 inside prison.
That's
which,
crazy.
oh my God, like I can't even imagine the amount of money the people who are making either smuggling it in or and who has that kind of money on the books or otherwise. You're clearly
Right.
not working. So I mean, what type of clientele could you possibly have that could cough up $400 for the same thing you could get $20 on the street? Either way, it kind of solidified what most of us think or weren't able to put our finger on and prove is that you can still get drugs while you're in jail and prison. Maybe not jail so much, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah. People smuggle it in. Both the inmates and visitors smuggle it in. Sometimes even attorneys have been found guilty of smuggling
oh
drugs
my
in.
dear.
Why would you risk your license doing something like that? That's
Exactly. Like
crazy.
that's no fear. What do you think you're above the law? I don't know. I mean, obviously laws are for a reason and most of that is to cause fear in us so that we don't commit them. So I did try to research where these guns went to. I wasn't able to actually land on this individual or any of his family members, but I do see that he is selling more than one gun. So he's selling a 38 caliber and a 30-30 to this Mr. Flannery, and it's saying that Mr. Flannery picked up his 30-30 and it's signed and it's on Jack's paperwork. So it looks to me to be that Jack again is not in jail at this point. Um, I also wondered if Jack thought that they might search his home based on this. Well,
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
not a problem. And that is another reason to exclude him from the Florence, Italy murders, which we did have another set of murders on September 9th of 1983, because if Jack is back here in the Rio Linda area selling guns, he's likely not off in Florence, Italy, which makes these couples crimes that are happening over there something to consider as far as a worldwide group or organization, either just to obtain media sales as far as newspapers and news are concerned, or just part of the group, creating another antagonistic type situation where other things may be going on that they don't want the public to pay attention to. So on September 9th of 1983, Wilhelm Friedrich Horst Meyer and Jens U. Rusch, Florence, Italy. I already marked up there, not Jack. Meyer and Rusch on September 9th, 1983. Two students from Osnabrück, West Germany, were visiting Italy to celebrate an important scholarship Meyer had just won. They were found shot to death in their Volkswagen Samba bus in Galuzzo. Rusch's long blonde hair and small build could have deceived the killer into thinking he was a female, and the police suspected that the students were gay lovers based on pornographic materials found at the scene.
Wow.
Yeah, very interesting. But back in Texas on September 17th of 1983, 21-year-old Kenneth Dwayne Shorty Stott in Porter, Texas, went missing. So it says that on October 3rd, 1983, an MCSO deputy was contacted by the mother of Kenneth Dwayne Stott, who reported that Stott had been missing since September 17th. That's quite a long time to allow somebody to go missing. He gave them 2 weeks to do something with this guy. Stott was known to have last been seen at the Porter Lounge Bar in Porter, Texas, leaving with two unknown males in a yellow Ford Maverick. Stott reportedly had approximately $240 in cash with him and was said to be en route to Humble, Texas, to pay down on a truck. Stott's own car was found abandoned at the Porter Lounge days later. It had been rumored since 1983 that Stott was murdered and buried in the East Montgomery County area. Stott is identified as follows: white male, date of birth 1/25/1962, 21 years of age when reported missing. He was 5'8", 145 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, last seen September 17th, 1983 in Porter, Texas. Acne on the face and back, last seen wearing white and black tennis shoes and a plaid shirt. Last known address was Route 2, Box 3112, Porter, Texas. And the connection, obviously, that I found in that was Humble, because we do see the 2005 finale letter that mentions Humble, Texas. So that always, raises my little feelers and makes me think that there could be some connection with that going on. Simple robbery, maybe. The fact that they found his car still left back at the lounge where it was kind of kind of gives you the idea or the concept that he didn't leave that bar alone on his own or at his own will. I mean, unless these two gentlemen had promised to give him a ride to pick that truck up, because obviously going from Porter, Texas to Humboldt, if he had driven his own car, he would have two vehicles that he would have to figure out a way to come back with. But you're not going to necessarily, I would think, ask strangers to give you this ride. So there's definitely something hinky that's going on there.
Okay, how did they know he had $240 in cash with him? Did he have it when they found his body?
It must have been I'm going to guess maybe his mother knew that was his intentions or plans. Maybe he had discussed what his plans were to do with his mom.
Yes. I guess what I'm getting at is, was it a robbery or was it just a murder?
They didn't say. I mean, it said he reportedly had this cash on him and was said to be en route to Humboldt, Texas to pay down on a truck. But they don't indicate whether or not that cash was missing or that they believed that this was a robbery. There just was not a lot of information on it. They're also old.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I
hear you.
I joined you a few seconds ago, but I wanted you to finish that part of the presentation. So
nice.
Anyways, good morning, Nolan.
Good morning.
We are going to hop back to, I think, one of the crazier times in Dennis and I's life when we were investigating these cases and putting the information together. And that was him coming across a set of pictures. And the thing that triggered me is that in 1983, Dennis had indicated that that his two sisters had come back from Michigan from their fathers. One of his sisters was 8 months pregnant. And that kind of flashed back in my mind these pictures that Dennis had brought to me at one point in time, stating that he had found them in Jack's belongings. The pictures are extremely graphic. I'm not going to show you the most graphic ones, and I have blocked out the face, which I kind of wished I didn't because I'd like to discuss those aspects, but I'm just going to, for the purpose of keeping this low key on these particular pictures, discuss what we can discuss about it without actively looking at the face. So these are color photographs. There does not appear to be any police presence. I don't see any markings. Now, I know that when they come in, at least as far as my forensic photography classes were concerned, you would come in from a distance and begin shooting your forensic photographs of the area. And of course, you're going to, as you walk up on it, take pictures. And then at some point in time, they're going to lay out markers. They're going to lay out measurements or things that they can use for measurements to get an idea of scale. What we see here is a person laying dead next to a railroad track. And when these pictures were given to me by Dennis, he had indicated that they were, that this was evidently one of his sisters, children's father, and that he had knocked her up when she was 13 or 14 years old, and that this was kind of the retribution for what he had gotten for being, for having done this to one of Jack's stepdaughters. Do you recall which one that was, Harriet?
Oh,
was it Mary?
I don't want to get too much in trouble. I'm trying to remember which one had the youngest children, and I think it was, I could be wrong, it could be Geneva. Isn't she born a little bit younger than Mary?
She is a little bit younger than Mary.
Yeah, so probably, so my apologies to Geneva and Mary, but I'm just trying to remember what Dennis had told me. So,
well, and if I look at the math on this, 1983 is when he's saying that they had returned, and that his younger sister was 8 months pregnant. He does not indicate which younger sister. It could be Geneva. Either way, we're talking Dennis was 4 in 71, and they clearly were at least a year or so younger than him. They were babies in his mother's arms when I saw the pictures. So if we put them about 2 years underneath Dennis, then we're looking at 12, 14, around 13, 14, and that would have either been Mary or Geneva. But these pictures, then eventually at some point in time, Dennis came back and said that Rick, Mary's husband, had put these pictures into Jack's stuff to screw with him. and that this gentleman had actively jumped off of a bridge, subsequently committing self-homicide. And so that's why I found the picture so extremely interesting, because if that was the case, who was there to see it? Who was there to take the pictures? Why don't we see the police presence that I would expect to see in these photographs, such as either some type of markings, some type of, little tent cards indicating, different elements of the particular scene? I don't see anything. And then when I got further and deeper into the pictures, I was a little more disconcerted with the fact that the information we were being given wasn't true. Number one, Rick was one of the first people with Dennis when he watched the America's Most Wanted 2000 episode on the Zodiac, in which case both of them had come to the conclusion that they believed that Jack was a likely suspect for this. And Rick has, been seen participating in his documentaries, talking about how he also believed that Jack was the Zodiac. So what prompted him? And I want to say it was about, I met Dennis in 2009. So somewhere between 2009 and 2012 is when these pictures popped up. What would provoke this individual who was so on Dennis's side about Jack being the Zodiac to attempt to mess with Dennis, as they claimed that it was in the end. So first, the story is that he got his retribution for having knocked up one of Jack's stepdaughters. To, he jumped off of a bridge, and that's pretty much where these pictures come from, which brought more questions than answers, since who ends up with these type of pictures?
Right.
How did they?
Is there more than one victim?
No, there's just one victim that we're going to discuss here.
It's not really Jack's MO to take pictures of his victims.
Well, that's not necessarily true. We have pictures of what we believe were Black Dahlia. We have other pictures that were found in his belongings of some nefarious stuff. So, and Jack was into photography. Well, I mean, Jack had...
In the Son of Sam murders, there's allegations that they were filming some of the murders.
Right. There actually was a gentleman, I guess, in the back of a van, right? But he ended up self-homicided. He ended up self-homicided as well, too, though, didn't he?
I don't remember. Oh, yeah. One of them, one of the photographers got killed. Yeah. They searched his house, took all their original his films
footage,
and then killed him.
and who does that? I mean,
well, it was
obviously
a cult in New York, in Yonkers.
Some type of an organized group, obviously, that didn't want to be outed for what was going on, and it sounded to me like they were making snuff films.
Yes.
So bringing us to this particular individual, now, whether or not it was retribution for having gotten a 13, 14-year-old pregnant, or it was a self-homicide, I don't buy the self-homicide for the very things we're going to talk about right now. And have you ever seen any of these types of pictures, Nolan? Like in your career with criminals? Yes. Have you dealt with any? Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that I point out here is that we have blood on the shoes. We have blood on, let me see if I can get my cursor over. Come back. We have blood on the shoes. We have blood on the thighs. Oh, going backwards. Let's go forward just a minute. We have a heavily soaked blood thigh area on both legs. So, and here's the only one I chose to show out of the entire body. And the reason for that is because I wanted to show that this blood pattern that is far reaching off to the right over here, I did not feel was consistent with somebody having leapt to their death. We see that the entire skull cap area, basically all the way to the back neck, is literally bloodied, completely saturated. The hair is completely saturated in blood. Most of the damage is actually found on the front end of his face, which includes a gash across the forehead. His teeth have been completely busted out of his face. We see blood and almost bruising along all of his arms and his chest in other pictures. And again, we see these heavily soaked thigh areas. That would almost lead me to believe that he was being beaten, maybe crouched down on his knees, because it's pretty much void on the shin area of the pants, but heavily soaked over the top of his own thighs, as if he was basically being beaten while on the ground, leaning over the top of himself, what have you. More confusing is this blood pattern all the way to the right over here. I mean, if you leap to your death, it's not like you're a rubber ball that's going to bounce around, right? I
Right.
mean, you're going to thud, hit the
Mhm.
ground, be done. And the blood pattern seems to be far heavier furthest to the right than even the area that is most closely located to the body. And so that brought more, like I said, more questions than answers as to whether or not this person actively leapt to their death. Why did this family have these pictures in their belongings to begin with? I don't know of anybody who would want these or keep these. I don't know that the police department would release these to the family members. Do you, Nolan?
No, I don't know. It would law enforcement would not release these. They maybe to a DA or to a defense attorney on a discovery request, but there's no reason why Jack should be in possession of these. And if this Rick guy or whoever it was that allegedly planted them in Jack's stuff, how did he get them? So
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, again, if
Mhm.
Mary was not the mother of the children of this guy, then why would Mary and Rick have access to them? Um, Again, it just that why would there be a DA involved if it was a self homicide? So there wouldn't a DA or even a defense attorney, right? None of
right,
this would even come into play if it was found to be a suicide. So it would. There are some telltale tattoos and marks, but again, identifying the actual year that this happened is eluding me as well. I see that the picture quality is much better than the picture qualities of what we see going on in 1983 with Jack's photographs. So it tells me that it is a newer generation picture rather than probably a 1983. I just happened to bring it up at this point in time because he was talking about that pregnant younger sister. So now, unless Mary and Geneva were both pregnant around 13, 14, it's just going to be one of them. I would have thought the pictures, if that were true, would have been in the hands of the individual who was the baby's daddy, I guess, if you will. One of them did actually reach out to me at one point in time and tell me to take the pictures down because they didn't want their children to skip across it on the internet, which is why I've covered it. I'm not showing the face. I'm not going through that kind of stuff. But I think that this particular act here should be investigated for the truth at a minimum.
yeah, we don't even know
It's a
where
part of.
the location is, do we?
No, I want to say that Mary and Rick were in Colorado at the time that Dennis got these pictures from them. I'm not sure. They may have been back in Washington, but no, there really was no indication. And as far as I can tell, if this is a newer generation picture, let's say late '90s or something like that, that's a death well after the act, right? I mean, the pregnancy we're talking is
Mhm.
1983, so. Did you ever get any more
Oh,
information from Dennis, Harriet, on these?
no, he rarely talked about those pictures, but what you're doing is a part of the process of how we got to know Dennis, how we got to know each other, so that this is an important flow in the process. You can't leave it out.
No,
so
no. It's another one
no,
of those
so
things that are unexplainable, and nobody should be in possession, I feel, of these pictures, nor should they want to be in possession, nor should Rick be attempting to somehow bolster or mess with Dennis, stating one reason why this person had died and then giving a subsequent later reasoning as to why this person died. And that later reasoning doesn't really even quite fit with what we're seeing. There's no explanation for this heavy blood pattern on the thighs. And we can almost
no.
even see the void right here in the crotch area, which would almost again indicate that he was either on his knees or he was hunched over his own lap, being beaten, where that blood is now just draining and pouring. I just don't see any other way that this blood on his thighs could have gotten there. One person, I think it was Juan actually, when I was discussing it with him, it indicated that, what if he had a compound fracture where the bone protruded from the thigh? Well, on both thighs, And even then, how does that blood even that's not spray. I mean, that is such a heavy pattern of blood to the right hand side. That is not spray.
Yeah.
Anybody have a yeah. Yeah, very, very strange. All right, moving on from
All I
that.
think is that I think that Jack was taking pictures of the crime scene, albeit he's most likely the one who did it. He's there, but who else is there? But
Right.
but it looks like it's a crime scene photo.
But if it was a
Photo.
crime scene photo, I would have expected to have seen better pictures.
No. I'm saying that he got pictures of this particular crime. So it's
Gotcha.
his crime scene. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't see any instances whatsoever of police involvement with these pictures. And again, I don't see the police handing these pictures over to somebody. I don't see if it was ruled a self homicide. I don't see it going to court and any defense attorney being involved who would end up with these pictures. There's more questions than answers, like I said. This particular map we talked about a little bit back many months ago with Sandy Betts. This is the 1980s. This is when she starts getting taunted by somebody who would like her to believe that they are the Zodiac. She states that she received a paper black hood in the rear of her vehicle. This particular map, she couldn't recall if it was left in her yard or in her mailbox or how she had gotten this map, but it literally mapped out many victims that were claimed to have been killed by the Zodiac. And as I went through here, I actually even found some consistency with her handwriting on it. So I see things that are in this particular writing that are not consistent with the Zodiac's writing. And then we see all of these different locations for victims, which I'm not sure that somebody would go out of their way to actually make a map of all their victims, especially if it could relate back to their handwriting, because then you're literally taking culpability for every single one of these murders, whether you committed them or not.
Okay, so who was Betts to begin with? Just a regular citizen, or why? Okay, go ahead.
She was friends with Darlene. What was her name?
Farron.
Darlene
She was friends.
Farron. Yep.
She was an acquaintance, let's say, with Darlene Farron. If I remember correctly, her and Darlene were dating the same cop.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the story.
What's that, Nolan?
Mm-hmm.
Darlene was dating a lot of people.
Yes.
She was a popular girl.
She worked at the Coronado Inn. And I guess this individual or some male would come in and taunt her and leave messages and notes. And, maybe she's talking about the Zodiac at this point and people are overhearing it. So they're just climbing on the bandwagon to mess with her. I'm not really quite sure. I have looked at the handwriting of one of the people she thought could possibly have been the contributor to the notes at her workplace. And I didn't find that handwriting was consistent with the Zodiac case. But again, here we have all of these different victims mapped out. I was able to substantiate and find most of these particular unsolved murders for these locations. But as we've discussed through some of the solves that Harriet's had, some of these murders were not committed by the Zodiac. He was just basically tattling on them, right?
Yeah, and part of there was a whole crew by the 70s and 80s, maybe even at the 60s. So when I learned that, I think we did a show about this a year or so ago. I said, I'm not discounting her claims that she was being taunted by Jack or somebody like Jack, because she knew Darlene Farron. At that time period, well, Darlene Farron was as evil as Satan. So, and Jack was definitely going to be taunting somebody like her or his crew, because she, in their heads, killed Bobby Kennedy in the ICU. I see so many solves saying the same thing. Darlene Farron is the one who shot Bobby Kennedy, their boss, in the ICU. Hats off to Sandy Betts.
With a needle or a gun? Mm-hmm. It would be, unless they had a silencer.
A gun.
That doesn't make sense. To
No.
get a gun into his hospital room and shoot him in the hospital room.
Yeah, using the repetitive decoded missives are saying the same thing for years, that that she got the time card and the suit from Donna Lass to go in and shoot Bobby Kennedy in the head in the ICU. It only took maybe 30 seconds to a minute to do this. And
I thought you'd said
so,
she shot him up with Numbatol.
oh, that's Marilyn Monroe up the rectum. That's Donna Lass involvement with yeah. So Darlene Ferrin in their mind is the one who's responsible for killing Bobby Kennedy. And so there was a long time period of stretch.
At the Ambassador Hotel,
Mm-hmm.
when he was on his way to before they took him to the hospital, he'd already been shot in the head. So
right,
yeah, but the autopsy revealed something suspicious. That's why Mel Belli got involved, because the bullet holes that they found there in the head didn't match the wound from matched the bullets that Sirhan used. So
indeed,
just gave,
a lot of people think he had blanks.
Yeah. So I'm like looking at this, and I said, that's where Jack is, and he's going through all the mind control hell, and that anybody who knew Darlene Ferrin had to go or was taunted.
Well, and there was information from Sandy Betts that Darlene was involved with some gentlemen out of Chicago, I believe, that had plates for making fraudulent money. Yep, counterfeit money. And of course, drugs were involved and all the other great things that come along with that. Just really no indication of who the two individuals were, I guess, that were from Chicago, or how many of them were from Chicago. Albeit we do know that Jack had his part in the Chicago area, so he could very well have been one of those people from Chicago, or he is simply the person following around and cleaning up the messes that these individuals are making. Who knows? So this map, again, it does actually show, as far as
I was just saying, very, very macabre. Okay. Anyway, right. Keep going.
It shows Santa Rosa. Now, do you believe that it is the group that's involved with the Santa Rosa killings, Harriet?
Definitely, Jack. I'm seeing numerous ones during the 70s, especially attributed to the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders, that it is involving other people that had to do with cocaine. And so he's not the killer, but he's got the information, and it's very, very well detailed, is that John Edward Walsh Jr. and his wife Reve are involved in a mess, and these kids, so it's just it's by the 70s. There's this huge crew. I don't even know the names of all of them, but I can name them.
So do we know who first connected Santa Rosa? Was that Robert Graysmith?
Yeah, Robert Graysmith, from what I understand, saw all the hints. It's very Zodiac-esque how the victims died, but it looks like Jack and his crew are involved because they're getting information, trying to stop the flow of cocaine, and which was coming, according to the solves I got, which a lot of people will agree it had to do with Hoffa and Giancana. And in the end, they were after Hoffa and Giancana. And then that stopped, and then we can go on to Pablo Escobar during the 70s and the 80s.
So it's almost as if they're really plotting or attempting to pin all of this on one single elusive killer to keep them all kind of hush-hush as to the actual involvement of the individuals that are responsible for this, which kind of reminds me of Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, in the sense that they kept trying to close mass amount of unsolved murders on a single individual, kind of just keeps going in rhyme and reason with what we see going on through these cases for many, many years.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
A quick point. Yeah, the
Yeah.
writing on this map does not look like Jack or Zodiac writing.
No. And some of the, like I had indicated, I had seen some of the handwriting was consistent with that of Sandy Betts. And that's these capital letters in the middle of lowercase writing, which we didn't really see a lot of. Now, the Zodiac was notorious for that capital K, but he wasn't typically writing with any other capital letters in the middle of lowercase writing. So I did find that to be rather interesting, that there were some consistencies there. I just haven't sat down to literally map all of that handwriting out as to whether or not who it pertains to. I did speak to her not too long ago, Sandy Betts, and I had asked her if she wanted to come back on during the 80s series in order to kind of go through some of this information in chronological order. And she had indicated that somebody had reached out to her who she thought she was going to either be interviewing with or talking to in regards to it, that she felt might be a good person with leads to who the Zodiac was. I'm not sure if she's talking about this new girl that's on Facebook that is just absolutely ridiculous in her assertions. Or who it is, she didn't mention, but she said she wanted to hold off before coming back onto this podcast because she thought that might yield some good information in some way. So we'll see.
One quick point. My hypothesis is that writing is the writing of a woman, not a man.
You think so?
Yeah, I might just be stereotyping, but it's just so neat and
yeah, very flowery.
Yeah. It looks more like a
okay.
But that's just stereotyping. I don't know. It's a hypothesis.
You know,
that's okay.
One of the reasons why I don't really kind of buy into the people who create guidelines like, let's see, Swig Dog and who was the very first people? I want to say it was the ASTM. They had guidelines for document examiners and what they felt that we could do within our abilities of determining handwriting and authorship. And one of them was handedness, whether or not somebody was left or right-handed, and another one was gender. And these are two areas I attempt to stay away from because we all deviate from the way we learn the lesson to write. And who's to say that just because one enters one direction and another enters another, that has to do with handedness. Also, the idea behind a left-hander is typically they have a leftward slant, and that's due to the way that they have to write and keep their hands out of the mix of what they're writing, lest they actively, cause things to smear and smudge. And I am one of those people as a left-hander that writes perpendicular, straight up and down, and I do not hold my hand in that same fashion. So how would somebody be able to determine I was left-handed if I did not carry through with those same type of attributes? As far as gender is concerned, I have seen females with horrible handwriting that look worse than men. I've seen men with flamboyant, beautiful, gorgeous handwriting that look like women's handwriting. So that's another area I tend to stay away from because I don't think there's really any way that you can genderize handwriting or determine if they're left or right-handed without some pretty strong points. Sometimes you can tell that it's a left-hander and sometimes you cannot. So I err on those as a reason as to why I don't buy into some of these societal guidelines that are out there for us as document examiners. All right, that brings us into October 1st. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say quickly, when you talk about flowery handwriting, and I've seen it recently, Jimmy Carter, he wrote like a Southern genteel man. So very flowery, very, So,
Jack has beautiful, Jack has beautiful cursive. As far as I'm concerned, his cursive is very nice. Especially for somebody who isn't as educated as we'd expect them to be, because typically speaking, you only really hone in your skill and develop really beautiful cursive handwriting by doing it consistently. And usually that's by going through college. That's by, doing something that causes you to exercise and practice it.
I think he went into the College of Intel Community. So, all the stuff I see there, pick up on Latin and German words, Spanish words. So just not official universities, but he definitely has education.
Right. No, he does, and we do show lots of
Yeah.
after military type schools, for TV and for firefighting and things like that. But I just don't get the impression that you're writing essays in those type of systems. I mean, that's usually kind of a technical course where you focus simply on what it is, the task at hand, which is learning whatever that field is, versus when you're taking English classes and debate classes and other classes in college that require you to actively handwrite. I mean, obviously before computers, handwrite your papers and your essays. And that's where you get a majority of your practice. October 1st of 1983, we have 20-year-old Heidi Villarreal Faye in Texas. Do you know if I have her name correct? I wrote Faye or Faye. I wasn't sure which one it was.
I've done her, and she's a victim of Robert Abel, but yeah, it's hard to pronounce. Villanueva Fry, yeah.
Villarreal, yeah, Faye.
Yeah.
She was found April 4th, 1984, went missing 6 months previous, went to use a payphone at the League City convenience store, which is kind of one of the same areas and type that Laura Miller was taken from. Her father is Tim Miller. He's the one I say that got the finale letter. She was beaten to death with a club, had broken bones, found in the killing fields where Miller and two Jane Does were found. And of course, I did put in here that this could be Jack visiting mom before going to jail. He's back in Texas at this point because we see a couple things that actually occurred during this time frame. On October 3rd of 1983, we get a letter that comes out that says, "You got my first." It's postmarked Kalamazoo, Michigan. Have you seen this letter or know of its existence, Harriet?
I'm going to have to look into that one when I'm through with the current things that I'm sucked into.
It definitely starts out like a statement that we expect. It definitely starts out like a. Okay, hold on, Harriet. It definitely starts out like a statement that the Zodiac that would give, "You've got my first," or "You found my first," or "Now you found my initial activity in Riverside," as he states in regards to Sherry Jo Bates. It's going back to Michigan, which we're coming out of that area of the Michigan stuff. And of course, we also have the let's see, October 26th of 1983, Sandra Rambler in Santa Fe, Texas went missing. She was abducted on her way to the store. I don't believe that they'd found her body. But I'm sorry, I skipped over the fact that Jack is actively requesting a divorce on October 20th of 1983 from Nora Kaufman. Or Nora Terrence at this point. So not only is he selling his guns, he's divorcing his wife. He's basically free to come and go as he pleases. And we see these things that are going on in Texas, and we're seeing more communications that are popping up. On October 20th, we just did Sandra Rambler. But that brings us to November 2nd of 1983, which is the Corvette Concepts murder that happened in Texas. And it was Beth Wilburn, Thomas McGraw, and James Oates. Beth was stabbed 129 times, which seems like a horrible overkill. In addition to being shot, it says McGraw was shot and stabbed 15 times by a sharpened screwdriver embedded in his spine. Now, of course, we can see over here to the right, this is a portion of the finale letter that was sent to Tim Miller that goes to Tom Humble, 595 West, Main League City, Texas. And it says Corvette Concepts Fiasco Mystery. So he's literally included this, I believe, as one of the events that he was involved with. We're not going to be able to carry on with that. We're down.
Jeez. Okay, I've done that one too, but he had the information, and God, those people that did this, and witnesses, and who was driving one of the vehicles. I can go on, but
so you have completed a solve on. You have completed a solve on that letter.
Involving it. It's involving it. It's who the killers are, but he definitely had the information, and it was a fiasco. It was a mess.
Yeah,
we
do show that there were arrests made. We do show that
I
arrests were made.
believe there was.
But
Mhm.
come May 12th of 2021, it's back to it's being offered for answers in a cold case murder. So as late as 2021, they're stating they still don't have the answers or the killer involved with this case. So it just kind of goes to show you what media will do as far as, promoting false news and putting things out there that, oh yeah, an
Mhm.
arrest is made, but what happened? And then back to, oh, it's a cold case murder again. All right, you guys, that's all we have the time for. I'm going to pick up where we left off
Mhm.
here next week, and we will come back to the Corvette concepts because there's a whole lot more to say about this particular crime. Thank you guys for being here,
Okay.
and you all have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday.
See you next Friday.
Happy weekend.
Happy
Yep.
weekend.
Happy weekend, everybody.
Ho, 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 ho.